Good day, podcast community. I'm Podcast Pete, and we got a special guest on here now. I want to, you probably, if you're listening to this next week, the storm will have blown through. We'll be back to normal. I mean, you never know what the future will bring. But I want you to know that Larce set his schedule up, rain or shine. He is a guest on our podcast. So we want to honor him for being courageous and just plowing through the rain and just getting on this podcast. So thank you, Larce, for doing that. But tell our viewers who you are, what you do, and who you serve, and then we'll get into the podcast.
Okay, wonderful. My name is Larce Carter. I am a resident of Georgia, and I am in the assistant services with home health. Mm-hmm. So I have my own in-home health business that is attached to cardiology services, mm-hmm. and I double as a business development specialist for ABBA Healthcare Services. Mm-hmm. So, we contract with the VA, the Shepherd Center, Emory, and so forth, servicing those people who need care beyond the four walls of the hospital.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned a word there that's special to my heart, Shepherd Center. So I was there for 39 days, so I got to know a lot of people. So that was cool. So what is your connection? How do you serve when they get out? Are you giving them the in-home service that they need?
Yes, we're the in-home healthcare providers. So regardless if that's, you need someone to help you get out of the bed, passing your meds, 24-hour care, respite care. Even if that's just mere companionship. Hey, I'm a little lonely with this process. I can't move. I can't go outside. I'm immobile. These different things. We're in a position to come and assist you in a tailor-made process for you that would allow you to be able to still experience a great quality of life. And we want to be a part of that.
Yeah, that life turns you upside down when you find yourself at the Shepherd Center. Mm-hmm. So it was like, I had Jamie Shepherd on my podcast. It was a couple months after I got out. I was amazed. Like I was in the cafeteria and he actually came up and said my name like, "Hey, Pete." I'm going like, what the heck? How does he know? I didn't have a name tag on. I mean, right. I still to this day don't know, but I had him on my show. And my question, because I wrote a book on reputation, and I in digital marketing before I had my stroke. So I'm familiar with the industry of reputation, of customer service. Right. And I'm amazed when I see excellence. So, mm-hmm. Because the insurance companies are picking up the tab there. I mean, that's a whole different story for a different day. But I had one time 10 people on one machine, 10 people.
Wow.
I mean, it's like, it blew my away because I'm looking mm-hmm. like 10 professionals. What does it cost to provide that kind of level of service? But
right.
what I realized is the culture of it. It's mm-hmm. like they service you like you're the most important person ever to arrive. Mm-hmm. And when you're vulnerable, like you said, you're in bed. I used to love it when they came to move. When you're sitting and you can't move, when that person's coming right. in, turning you over and just providing that little bit of movement, oh my gosh, it's like sunshine shining in. It's so wonderful. And I know 74 people down there. I know them by name because I'm a geek when it comes to that kind of stuff, but it is a special place. But I want to get back into really your story. So I know I know a tiny bit of it, but for our viewers, how did you find yourself in this industry of healthcare and serving and home care and what you're doing? What was your journey like that you got interested in that?
Yeah, for certain. So it started back when my grandfather had come down with dementia. He was a Vietnam War vet, came home and served as police chief DOT, and then, served in the church as well and just had a really full life. And the latter years of his life while serving in church, he started to have these spells of, blank thought and, just sort of starry eyed. And so we as a family, just paid attention to these things. And ultimately, via the doctor's visits and studies and tests showed that he had dementia, which is also what his mother passed from. And
Mhm.
so we all know dementia is a very vicious disease, very vicious disease. So his decline was towards more of the rapid end. So we found him bedridden, in the wheelchair in his favorite seat, and it stripped us of the beauty of his character, who he was. It strips you of your thoughts and your ability to talk and your ability to remember, of course. So during this process, we as a family just thought it was necessary to surround ourselves around him and give him the support that was necessary to prolong his life, provide him the best quality of life available to him, in this sickness, in this disease. And what that did was open up the door for me to understand that there's a whole industry. I mean, of course, we understand that healthcare is a thing, in-home services are a thing, hospice and respite care, and these services are a thing, but you don't understand the necessity of it and to have the access to it until you're in need of it. And so from working with him and just providing him what we as a family thought he deserved, being such the great man that he was for our family, the
Mhm.
patriarch of our family, um, I came out of that situation understanding that I had a knack for care. I had a compassion to serve.
Mhm.
And so coupling with my wife, and she's a part of the business that we have, Lovely Cardiology and Medical Staffing.
Mhm.
The earlier ages of that, we said, well, maybe we have something here.
Mhm.
And also, what was a conduit out of that was a nonprofit agency that my aunt started, and it's called Dad's Got Dementia. And what that did was walk people through the processes of the ADLs, the everyday living, just what you might expect in the whole process of your loved one coming down with dementia. And sometimes I would have slight exposure within that. And what that did was get my name out to the people in the network of the people that knew my grandfather. And from him, I got other phone calls from other people. Hey, we might need this assistance. Hey, we could possibly use your services. And so along that process and speaking with my wife, I said, hey, let me go back to school and, just get some of these certifications down because there's something here. There's something here. So doing that and then going to school, completing those services as stated, it was just the CNA, the PCT, EKG scans, blood draws and things like that. But, the necessities of those of the skills for those needed that are at home and outside of the hospital. And so this just snowballed into a big thing. And like you said at the Shepherd Center, it was the difference in us and the industry is that care, that compassion, that service that allows you to believe this is just more than transactional. You're
Yeah.
not just here because we write the check. You're not just here because it's your job. And that's the difference between quality care and exceptional care. And so that was the mainstay and the reason why I said, this is actually something that I love. This is something that I could see a future in. And that was, just the compassion in that service in the medical field. And so now we're here. I have partnered with ABBA Health Services. At first, I was contracted with some clients to assist them and just through and not to scratch my own back, but I know it's because of the compassion that I have
Yeah.
for my clientele. The administrator there was like, hey, because we had a patient who passed. Bless his heart, he had succumbed to COVID, and so after that, the contract, of course, was up. And then my superior came and said, "Hey, you've done great things here. We believe in who you are." And so from that, was moved into the position of business development because, of course, we could all use more business, but it's not just about more business as it is the quality of the service that you want to provide. And so
Yes.
we're here today.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, when you said dementia, it is the worst thing.
Mhm.
I experienced probably, I don't know, my dad who's passed, you know, probably had it. We didn't know it. This was 10 years
Right.
ago.
Yes.
You know, so you just kind of see a person change,
Overnight.
like trying to process it. I had the director for the Dementia Association on, and you know, and I asked him, I said, what myth can you address for our listeners? And he said, well, the earlier we can detect it, the better. He
Yes.
said that it's not it's not that we can, you know, make it go away, but there are drugs and there are things out there that can delay it. And I was
Yes.
like, you know, that's good to know because when you all of a sudden see these patterns changing in our loved ones, and you're thinking, well, I can't do anything about it.
Right.
And you know, if we have the mindset of let's see what we can do to get a professional to look at the situation, because
Mhm.
every single person is different. And I
Right.
he said that too, is just because you had this happen to a loved one doesn't mean this situation is the same. They're all different. And the brain is such a complex that we don't understand a lot of it. We had, now I have a question for you in just a second, but we had when I was at the Overture, which the average age there was 80. And so when I first moved in, there was a couple and he's passed, but they would hold hands coming to breakfast. It was
Mhm.
beautiful. Well, fast forward 2 months, he got serious dementia, got anger issues. He had to be transferred to the VA. And
Yes.
when he got transferred, his brain, he just shut down. He didn't open his eyes again. And then
Mhm.
passed a month later. And so you see how quickly life is and how it changes. And so you're it's a precious time of life that we want to honor people in whatever stage they're in to give them the most best comfort care we can. What would you say, like in your travels? I'm curious, like before you got into this, were you doing something else, and then with your grandfather getting dementia, it pulled you in? What type of business were you in that kind of you moved towards this?
Okay, so prior to, I was actually insurance agent,
Okay.
State Farm. So I was working the business, and it was pretty lucrative. Of course, if you in pretty much anything in the sales industry, if you know what you're doing, you're a sales professional, you're going to make it. But aside from the health and the life insurance portions of it, which did provide some fulfilling, entity for me, it just wasn't enough. It was just something that paid the bills, something that put money in my pocket. And that just wasn't enough for me. And
Mhm.
so during that process, I had just been in search of something else, something more. So along that way, I got involved in a lot more of nonprofit organization and assisting the homeless and just the downtrodden of society. And through that process, just worked myself over to this area where it was like, okay, well, health and wellness ultimately, and there's some type of marriage there. And from that, it just so happened that the way the good Lord would have it, that my grandfather started to experience these things, and I just segued into like this, para health professional, whereas it wasn't decided, but I was coming out of this industry. I knew I wanted to get away from the industry. I knew I wanted to do something else with my career. In the meantime, one of my favorite people in the world needs my assistance, needs my help. And to double back on what you were saying earlier, it's just so important for us to be proactive about our health, and especially as men. Like my grandfather, 6'4", big 250. He was always larger than life to us,
Mhm.
and I knew that he carried a lot on his shoulder because he was 13, 14, taking full care of all of his brothers and sisters and his mother in North Carolina. In I forget the name of the town. He'd be upset with me.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're in North Carolina. He took care of the family there. And ever since, he's always taken care of his family,
Mm.
down to the fact of grandchildren and great grands. And
Mm.
so, all that to say, I know him being the man that he was probably ignored some of those signs,
Mhm.
when his body was speaking to him. And so, all along the way, he was having those small strokes here and there, and because they don't show up like a stroke would, because they're these minuscule strokes that piece by piece tear away at us.
Yep.
And ultimately, through that whole process, he worked himself into a place where it was understood, okay, Papa, we understand something's going on. So they went to the doctor, and the doctor was maybe asking a few questions, hey, I'm gonna need you to remember this. I'm gonna need you to remember that. I'm gonna need you to remember that. And through that process, I can't believe, excuse me, I can't remember which aunt it was or if it was my mom, but through that process, bless his heart, Papa was looking at Granny for the answers to some of those questions, and she would try to answer the question, in a occult way, a hidden way, so that the doctor would understand and what was going on. But of course, between some of those things and literal tests and things like that,
Yeah.
it came to the light that Granddad was suffering from this disease, and like stated, I just happened to be in a good area to just say, you know what, Granddad, let's shift this time back over to you. I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. My
Mhm.
family's in an okay place. Let's help you out, and just be here in these latter years of your life. And through that, culminated into what it is now.
Mhm. Yeah, that I do see a pattern in our senior industry. When people get touched by a loved one, they
Hmm.
see the beautiful nature of the last part of life, and
Yes.
it grabs you and it doesn't let you go. And
Hmm.
so you begin. I can see what you said is you're drawn to it. You see, how precious people are when they're at a stage where it's the latter part, and it crushes you to see it, but it's the reality. But it's every situation is different when it comes to a family member.
Hmm.
What what would you say, like, is your biggest challenge as you're out there in the marketplace servicing your clients? What do you see that you could share with our viewers is a challenge in your world?
The biggest challenge I believe I experience is something that's, uh, I would say, out of my control, which is the experience overall with the people who take part in healthcare and are our service providers and our service people and our frontline workers.
Mhm.
It's not just a job. It's not just where I go to clock some hours and get a check. It's the service industry, but it is a special place within the service industry. And the challenges that I mostly see, and the reason why this was the best idea for me to get into the business, was the lack of compassion,
Mhm. Yeah.
the lack of love, the lack of understanding that regardless of who this person is, what their condition is, how they may be compromised, they're a human.
Mhm.
They have dreams, hopes, aspirations. They have people they love. They have people who love them. Um, in most instances, prior to the lives that they experience now, they were living full lives, and just, were these beautiful masterpieces. And not to say that they aren't now, but just because the paint is chipped a little or the colors have dulled does not take away from the beauty of who they are.
Yeah.
And so in my experience, that's the most heartbreaking sort of portion for me, is to understand that there's a sect of people, and of course it's any industry, but we're focusing on the healthcare industry.
Yeah.
It's just, some people just don't have the love for humanity that's necessary to step into these roles and provide care for these people, let
Mhm.
alone, some of the tenderest portions of society. And I think that's just the biggest yoke that I carry, and why I take the job so serious, and why it's necessary for me to, outside of work hours, if I see auntie or uncle or someone, let me get that door for you. Is that too heavy? Can I carry that where you're going?
Mhm.
Is there anything that you need? Maybe just put a smile on their face. If that's just a, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
Seeing someone on a park bench, and of our elder years, and going and sit and have a conversation with them. Aside from that, understanding that that's a huge disconnect into society today, that
Yep.
our old people and our young people, uh, they're not coming together. They're not sharing the information and the knowledge, and some of the know-how and some of the experience that's necessary for the younger generation to know, as well as understanding that the younger generation are what keep the older generation young. You know what I'm saying? That
Oh,
experience to be able to say, hey, you're not a pariah in society just because you've maxed out your years, and you can't put in any hours here, or you can't work here, or you can't do that, or you can't lift this. There are still places of importance for the elders in our society. And I just think as a whole, we have just sanctioned them to a place of just fragile, handle with care. And the shelf life is no longer there, so let's just box them up and make sure that we put them in this padded room so they don't break anything. But doing that also is excluding them from a rich experience for us and for them as well. And so I think that's just a culmination of all the things that I experienced: the lack of compassion, the lack of the importance of eldership, and the relationship and the coalition between the two.
yeah. There. Do you know Leonard Abbott? It's cool to care.
That might sound familiar. I don't want to tell any stories on this Thursday.
Well, he's been on my nonprofit because Glenda Hicks does a nonprofit podcast, and he has a nonprofit plus he brings the youth together with the older
Wonderful.
senior citizens to just what you described to both can learn from each other.
Yes.
It's just intentionally bringing parties together to gather that the wisdom from the seniors and of course the wisdom that younger people especially can give in the technology side to the older people that life changed as far as technology overnight. I mean,
Right.
now you got 2-year olds on iPads and they know how to navigate and that presents a challenge for our seniors is
Yes.
to be able to um, navigate a whole new world, and our
Hmm.
younger people can help them through that. What would you say? Do you see? I know this is kind of a question that everybody's got an opinion on. AI, do you see it helping your business, or how do you see it maybe happening in your world from just your eyes?
Um, as anything, there are pros and cons. Um, and I think one of the sayings is, too much of anything could be a bad thing. Even good things, too much of them could present a situation in other areas of our life. I believe AI does have its place. I believe it has proven useful to us in these initial rollouts. However, I do believe that there is um, areas of caution that do present themselves as well with the introduction of AI. If I could just give you an example, a good
Mhm.
example.
Mhm.
We met at the Senior Network event, and a good event it was. And I hate that I cannot recall the gentleman's name, but he is with one of the startups with an AI company that is allowing them the possibility to set up AI within the homes of individuals and allows them to scan the mobility and the access to portions of their home, monitoring sleep, monitoring bathroom patterns, monitoring kitchen use and eating, and all these things without setting up an invasive system of cameras and so forth and so on. And it was just a beautiful model of how this type of technology, can really serve as a great plus to us. It was one of the a very innovative way I've ever even seen someone come to the market with such a product. And like stated, I have his card and his information. I
Yeah,
just wish I could
you know,
recall his.
because Scott Morrison, who he presented, I think, at either that one or the one before, but he's
Mhm.
with primary care and mobility, bringing them both together. But he talked about that
Okay,
because,
so now that you say that, I know Scott. Is that First Care Management?
yeah, well, he was talking about the person you just described to her,
Okay, okay.
that because my mom has the fall, I can't get up, the button, but if she's
Mhm.
not wearing it, it doesn't help. But
Right.
the idea that we have patterns, we're in the kitchen, so
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
knows your pattern. So if I'm not in a certain place at a certain time, it's giving off some kind of alarm or
Signal.
something,
Hmm.
signal that, hey, better check on mom because she's usually here at this time,
At
but
this
she's
time,
not,
right?
without cameras being all over the place, where
Exactly.
it's kind of a intrusion of privacy. I think that's just my opinion.
So,
But
so I think that that's a beautiful example of how AI can be
yeah,
definitely a huge major plus in our lives. So, from that perspective, and then from the other end is maybe not within that example or that regard, but what it does is takes away that human interaction,
yeah, yeah,
takes away that necessary connection, takes away the warmth of a hug,
yep, yep,
the engagement of a organic conversation, of someone who knows you, of
yep,
someone who can recall of such a time where we did such a thing, and do you remember how we felt when that happened? And those experiences, just that human life, the colors that fill out the back of the picture, maybe not in the forefront, but create the filler of our lives. I believe that's one of those negative aspects of AI, where it's necessary for us, intrinsically as humans, we desire to interact.
yes,
That it's in our DNA that we want to interact. And so artificial intelligence has the ability to strip that from us and alter our desire. Hey, sweetheart, my daughter's up now.
all right. Well, she comes in at the just perfect time. So I want you to
Right.
spend time with your daughter. So tell our viewers, how can they get a hold of you, Larce?
There are many ways to get a hold of me. My number is here on the screen, 404-552-4609. As well, you can send me an email to our business at lovelycardiology.com. That's
Mhm,
LOVELEI cardiology at
mhm.
gmail.com. Without the Gmail portion, if you just tag a .com on the back of that, you can reach us at our website. As well, I am business development specialist at ABBA Health Services, as well an in-home health agency. We're in a position to service a plethora of people with a plethora of ways to pay private pay insurances, our veterans and so forth. So check us out at abbahealthservices.com. And between that myriad of contact, you'd be able to reach me, and we would be in a position to discuss and assist you in ways possible.
And we'll do this. We'll try to get that in the show notes. So send us so Trexa can put it in the show notes. She's gone
Wonderful.
this week, but yeah, we'll get it in there. So links so we can have people get a hold of you. So as we finish up, Larce, what would you say? What would be the one thing you want our viewers to take home from our time on this podcast?
One thing to take home. I believe that we all should understand that life is short and fleeting, and it's necessary to show love to those around us. And that is not just within the confines of your home or your bloodline or family names. Everyone needs love, and the way that I'm a firm believer in Christ, and the way that my life is set up and the things that he's done for me has allowed me the opportunity to show love to those around me and be enriched myself. So it'd be a lot of flowery words that we could use and great epithets to put into place, but let's just love each other. The world is missing love and compassion.
I love it. I love it. I do. No, that's great advice and great. Thank you for sharing that with our viewers. And stay dry in our storm that's coming up, and love on your daughter. All right. Thank you, Larce. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you for having me on. Take care.
You're welcome. Bye now.